My name is Samantha Jacobs, and I'm a member of the Midwest Pork Conference Committee, and this is our VFD panel. Our speakers today will each give a short presentation lasting 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll have an open question and answer. Special thank you to JBS United Inc. for sponsoring the breakout session. When we have our discussion in the morning, it will be moderated by our MCP committee chairman, Nick Tharp. And our speakers today are going to be Dr. Jeff Harker from AMVC, Scott Ringer from JBS United Inc., and Dr. Kerry Keffaber from Elanco Animal Health. So let's give them a big round of applause. And our first speaker is going to be Dr. Harker.
Yep, you can just jump right on to Scott. I think I'll go ahead and hold this if it works. I'll just do this. Okay. I'll just stand over here and look at the slides so I don't have to look at you guys. No. So I'm going to start off with just a few things here that kind of the basics of a VFD. If you haven't already done one for like Palmitil or something in the past, it's going to be new to you coming January 1. Hopefully it doesn't hit you new on January 1. You get it done ahead of time because according to the letter of the law, you're supposed to have those pigs with medication in the feed bins have a VFD on site or written already by January 1. So that's the letter of the law is all these drugs I'm going to show you in a second are supposed to have a VFD written. If there's feed in the bin with medication on January 1st, you're supposed to have a VFD on file. Now, will FDA come inspect and do anything like that? We'll discuss about that in the Q&A. But so the first thing, the veterinarian, that's me or whoever your veterinarian of choice is. If you've not had a vet on the farm in the last X number of years, probably a good time to get one there here soon so you can get your VFDs and run medication in your feed. Second thing is the client, that's the people, people paying the bills and buying the medication. Third thing is the animals. So that's the VCPR, vet, client, patient. Patient is the pig. One or more animal sites, that is the patient. Then the feed distributor gets a copy of this so that they can sell you the medicated feed, and then the actual medication is the, whether or not it requires VFD or such things as that. So with on-farm feed mixing, let's see, you've got to have the VFD to buy the medicated premix, the type B premix. And you can't have medicated feed in the bin after the expiration date, and there's that VFD required for feed in the bins on January 1. So buying a bunch of product ahead of time won't help you if FDA comes to inspect. Now, if you don't get inspected, then obviously you could probably get away with having a bunch bought ahead and then mix it in the feed on farm. But a lot of places wouldn't want to take that risk. If you're buying from a toll mill, you will have to have a VFD on January 1 or you will not be getting medication in that feed. So that's that quick slide. This was from, you can see down there, I'll credit the slide, the Global Vet Link. This is a webinar that they have. I think that's open access if you want to review what they're saying. Global Vet Link is who we're going to be using to do all of our VFDs. That's an electronic service, so they'll take care of making sure everything is formatted correctly and we got all our details taken care of. So here's the list. Medically important antibiotics. You got basically these 6. There's some other combinations that I may not have here. I've got the tetracycline sulfapenicillin. Actually, that is not approved. The penicillin is only approved for growth promotion, so it's going to be removed. So, but there is a labeled version of tetracycline sulfa. So, but any combination with tetracycline, any approved combination with tetracycline requires a VFD. So, Denigard, CTC, any of those combinations. So that's commit that to memory because those are the ones that you got to have a VFD before you're going to be able to put them in feed. Then these are non-medically important or not antibiotics. As you can see down here, you look at schisis and wormers and paline, and then those first 4 are antibiotics, technically antibiotics that do not require a VFD. Denigard is in the kind of in between because if it's mixed with tetracycline, it has to have a VFD. If If it's not, then you don't have to do a VFD. So if you use DentaGuard by itself, you don't need a VFD. January 1, 2017, growth claims will be phased out. So there's the list of all those things. You can see the 10 to 50 grams per ton of terramycin, the 10 to 20 gram rate of Thailand, 20 grams of Elanco. Those are not going to be, we're not going to be able to write a VFD for those dosages of those drugs. So again, this is another one that's from Global Vet Link. So if you got questions, you can check with them and go to their website and you can view this entire presentation. And that's it for my slides. I'm going to turn it over to Scott.
Well, first of all, it's definitely an honor to be a part of this panel. Also want to thank the organizers for including the VFD topic in the agenda as we quickly approach our January 1st deadline. Just briefly about JBS United. We are not JBS United or JBS USA. We are JBS United. Founded in 1956 by John Swisher. Headquartered in Sheridan, Indiana. Currently have 6 mills across the Midwest, employing approximately about 450 employees. We strive to provide our customers with quality service, innovation, and then research-based products. Okay, to the VFD topic. There's a few things here that I'd like to go over before the Q&A. We're going to go over the definition of what is truly a distributor, and then look at the distributor process role and the responsibilities, and then some future concerns and challenges that a distributor may see here in the next 3 to 4 months. And then, of course, looking forward to the Q&A afterwards. So, by FDA regulation, FDA defines a distributor as any person who distributes a medicated feed containing a VFD to another person. Such other persons may be another distributor or the client recipient of a VFD. Some examples of a distributor would be, of course, your feed mill. Could be a dealer, could be a farm store. As Jeff mentioned, it could be an on-farm mixer that is providing feed to another producer. Example of that would maybe be a contract grower. And then one I probably should have included in here was also veterinarians. Veterinarians can also supply medications to the producer as well. Okay, this just shows a simple diagram of the VFD process. Of course, the veterinarian will write the VFD, communicates it to the producer and the feed distributor, and then note below the feed distributor, there are a couple additional responsibilities that we need to follow up on, and that is before we can distribute a medicated VFD feed, we need to send the intent to distribute letter to FDA prior to delivering or selling feed. Also, we are required to complete an acknowledgement letter that we would send that to the drug supplier. Looking at some roles and responsibilities of a distributor, of course, receive an electronic or handwritten VFD. Today, we're approximately receiving about 80% electronic VFDs, primarily through Global Vet Link. Then we review that VFD for accuracy and completeness. FDA has warned distributors that incomplete VFD is invalid and should not be processed. Earlier on, probably in the late 90s when we were distributing Comatil, we were receiving a lot of incomplete VFDs, and that's where we were really getting our hands slapped by the FDA when they would come in and do inspections. They would write us up for receiving those incomplete VFDs. So that's an important process and something to remember as a veterinarian is writing those. And again, I think if the veterinarian is using Global Vet Link, it really reduces, if not eliminates, those errors when writing VFDs. We feel like the VFDs are easily communicated and basically streamlines the process. The last one there, determine the appropriate amount of feed to be distributed for the approximate number of animals authorized by the VFD. We see that being very challenging, specifically if you have a VFD with 15 to 20 locations listed on there. If there's a duration of use, I'm going to use tomicin in a product where you feed that for 21 consecutive days, it's going to be really challenging for us to determine what is the appropriate amount to send. So I guess to the veterinarians, to the producers, as much information that you guys can provide the feed distributor will help us to do that. Some other roles and responsibilities: properly manage inventories to ensure products remain fresh and available. We want to make sure that antibiotics and feeds with antibiotics are readily available to treat those animals. And then also develop a record-keeping system and provide records during regulatory inspection upon request. And then the last one would be ensure compliance with all applicable state and federal regulations. I would think that if an inspector is going to show up at the distributor, the veterinarian, or even the producer, he's going to probably look at more than just VFDs. He's going to look at see if you're complying with the medicated CGMPs or any other applicable regulations. Okay, looking at some future challenges, determine the appropriate amount to distribute for the number of animals and locations listed on the VFD, like I determined earlier. Supply chain and inventory control. I think what we may see is unpredictable usages of keeping proper quantities on hand could be a challenge. And then also keeping those products fresh if usages drop. Basically, the products we keep on the floor are going to be, that usage is going to be determined if you have a VFD or not. So I think as time goes on, we'll have to make sure that we're monitoring those inventories very closely. And then, of course, the increased paperwork and monitoring, that just does not apply to the feed distributor. It also applies to the veterinarian. It also applies to the producer. Currently, we're receiving anywhere from 250 to 300 VFDs annually. That's for 2 to 3 VFD drugs. You add another 10 or 12 antibiotics to that, and that's a lot of VFDs in 1 year. Okay, for some final thoughts, of course the goal is use antibiotics judiciously. 3 things that I feel that are important, just not to the distributor but also the veterinarian and all parties, is basically training your internal staff, partners, and any clients. And then develop a plan for compliance and regulatory compliance, and then monitor your system for that compliance. Because what FDA has told us was they're going to go to the feed distributor and they're going to randomly select 3 VFDs, and out of that 3 VFDs, they're going to pull 1 VFD. They're going to track it forward to the veterinarian, and then they're going to track it back to the producer. So we feel that just not the distributor is going to be inspected, but also the veterinarian and the producer. And then the last one I feel is really important. Again, communicate between all parties. You go back to that diagram. It's going to be critical that everybody that's listed on there is communicating properly and at all times. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Good afternoon or good morning. I don't have any slides. You'll have to just look at me and be disappointed. I work for Elanco. We're a company that had the first VFD product, Palmitil. How many use Palmitil? Hey, good. That's been out 10 years, but we've changing, as Scott mentioned, significantly more antibiotics is going to be under the umbrella. We work with GVL, established the first electronic VFD. So we, as most companies, been out adapting this for the last 5 years, finding a path forward, helping adjust our labels, and then we've done webinars and training and material quite extensively. So we're going to get into answering more of the specific questions that you're going to have. So how many of you have heard about this change and how antibiotics are used in the VFD process? Good. How many are fully prepared? Well, no one is. So I think that brings the point. So I'm going to raise a little in the discussion about the why. Why are we doing this? Why is it important? And I think it goes back to demonstrate, communicate, and then collaborate. So I think this gives us a great opportunity to demonstrate that as pork producers, as animal producers, we're doing the right thing. So science used to be pretty cool. When I used to watch TV, Mr. Science on Saturday morning, I wanted to be that guy. Where's going to solve all the problems? Now, as most of the consumers may look at that, science isn't the solution, science is the problem. And, I need to put on this big spatial suit before I go out in these cornfields because of that old, icky GMO things. So as we look at this, we're in a business that we're dependent on the confidence and trust of the people that consume our food. So this gives us a great opportunity to demonstrate that we are doing the right thing. So holiday was a couple weeks ago, and it wasn't a celebration without consuming food, and oftentimes meat. Well, what was Thanksgiving? And oftentimes a discussion, how are we thankful for all things? How many of you are really thankful about having to have more paperwork about antibiotics? Yay! No one enjoys that. But I think we can be thankful in all things, as this keeps us still access to antibiotics. It still allows us to use these tools correctly to protect the health of animals, to maintain sustainability, and even food safety. So I think we'd all agree to deny or delay antibiotic treatment for animals because of a policy or because of process and paperwork is not fair, not appropriate. But we need to continue to demonstrate that pork producers, beef producers, poultry producers can do the right thing moving forward and go forward. So what's the reality? When we look at the umbrella of animal health, it's tied to human health and it's tied to environmental health. Still, 1 in 2 people get the wrong nutrition every year. And it's not often always access, it's the wrong things. It's not about energy or carbohydrates or calories. It's about balance. It's about amino acids. It's about micronutrients. You look at the demand, 60% more demand of protein in the next 30 years. Someone explained to me total food was that the same amount of food we've produced the last 10,000 years, we're going to need to produce in the next 40 years. And there's tremendous demand for protein, and it does impact cognitive and overall development of people, and there's a shortage. We did that estimate 3 to 4 years ago about projected need. You know what we're finding out? That was too low. It's even more demand. And the other concern, our ability to produce it, our advancements in technology is going down. 20% of animals are lost by death and disease. No matter how animals are raised, disease is going to be present, and if we can't protect them with antibiotics, it's not going to be possible either ethically as veterinarians and producers, or even over the ethically to have food for people. It's the most significant food waste and oftentimes not talked about. 1.6 planets are used every year. We use 1.6 of our renewable resources every year to produce our food. That can't be sustained. So if we look at One Health and how antibiotics fit in, healthy animals lead to healthy people and also a healthy environment, and how do we look at things together? So can we demonstrate that we're doing the right thing and continue our access to antibiotics? Second, how are we going to communicate about that? So I think there's some great stories. If we can develop trust, we can add and communicate. 40% of the antibiotics used in animals are animal only that don't impact resistance. On a pound-per-pound basis, there's 10 times more antibiotics used in humans than there are in people. If you look at estimates of what could impact of the top 5 antibiotics are used in people, that's only 14% is what's used in animals. So if we get wrapped in the debate of arguing the impact of animals, we oftentimes get a deaf ear. But if we can demonstrate that we're hearing you, we also assume responsibility to help fix, and also move forward to do it right and demonstrate it, we can communicate together how we're moving forward and have some great stories about how we're doing it right. So if we demonstrate, communicate, then we need to collaborate. So as we work together, it's going to take farmers, it's going to take veterinarians, it's going to take producers, it's going to take suppliers, all working together to move forward. But I think also we have to look at how, as a protein industry, we maintain the ability to raise and produce in the U.S. And oftentimes we create competition between pork and beef and poultry. We're on this as a protein, and also we create competition and concern and trust by attempts to differentiate. So doing surveys of why people go and buy food, what's the top 3 things? Price, taste, nutrition. If you ask people open-ended questions and match that with buying behavior, cost, taste, nutrition. Now, there's 4 to 5% are going to buy it on other reasons. And that 4 to 5% is amazing. How much antibiotic, raised without antibiotics poultry is sold today? Would you guess? How much poultry is raised without antibiotics? Somebody say some number.
Half.
It's 5%. There's about 15% attempting to be raised with antibiotics, but 5% that saturates the market. There's 5% organic, there's 5% in all these specialties. So we have to provide that choice, but that doesn't have to be the trend. And oftentimes, by attempt to differentiate, you capture that 5%, but also you make the 95% less effective. Recent survey with the National Chicken Council did, what are you concerned about when you buy your poultry? It was freshness, taste, and then they asked what else. Was antibiotics was about 3 to 4%. Use of hormones in chicken was 8 to 9%. So how much hormones used in raising chicken? None. So we have to be careful and attempt to differentiate that you don't just lower the overall perception of your product. How can we be pre-competitive as we work with other proteins and find a path forward that we maintain access and maintain moving forward? So we also focused on doing some research focused on people that buy foods, particularly at Chipotle's, Panera, and Chick-fil-A. Looking at, and it was an aha for me of why they go there. I'll let you into a real big secret. They go to those places, they go to most restaurants because the food needs to taste good and they can afford it. We also did a survey trying to say these are farm claims, these are claims on how they're processed, or they're claims on how the food is prepared. So, raised on humanely would be a farm claim. Used ascorbic acid to prepare would be a processing claim. A food claim is juicy tomato, delicious flame broil. So what would rank highest in people's minds when they went to a restaurant and bought their food? It drove totally about the descriptions of the food and the taste. And often the feedback is, I don't want to think about how my food's raised. I want that disconnect. I don't want to realize this juicy hamburger came from this steer running out here. So to summarize, I think, one, we have a great opportunity to do it right, and we'll go with the answers how you specifically do it right and demonstrate to others that we are. We can communicate this broadly to a broad audience. There's nothing more resonating to say. Going forward, all medically important antibiotics only going to be used for therapy under the supervision of veterinarian. That's a solid, comforting statement. And third, as we collaborate and move forward with all parts that's going to be involved with this and even the protein industry, how do we work with a common message and move forward as we maintain ability to operate and freedom to operate in different regions? So we'll open up to questions. So there was a note here is shut Kerry off at a certain time. Am I okay? That's good.
Actually, Kerry, you have 3 more minutes.
Oh, that's good. So that's danger that way.
All right, at this time, we're going to open up our panel of questions here. And so if anyone out in the audience has a question for these gentlemen, we'll start by raising hand. Then Jeff or whoever has the mic in their hand at that time, if you could repeat the question so everyone can hear, and then you guys can respond. So,
Is it working? Kind of. Okay.
So everyone has all your answers. So questions we often get is can you put multiple sites on one VFD? What do you think the answer to that is? Yes. Yeah. You know, if you have the same owner, particularly the same feed source, you can put 1,000 sites on that one VFD to be able to implement it correctly and go forward. The other question we get sometimes is, does the veterinarian have to be licensed in the state where the pigs or animals are located? What's the answer to that? Yes. He doesn't have to reside there, but he has to be licensed there. How about the feed mill? Does it have to be in the same state as the animals? No. As long as the veterinarian supplies it. And I'm getting cut off, so some questions from the field.
Batteries. Done. Yep, low battery.
I saw a hand start to go up there.
As a feed distributor, I'm selling pilot 40, CPC 50 for the producer. Do I have to try to figure out how many grams of pilot 40 I'm selling or number of hogs you've got?
Scott will start, and he'll get it right. And I'll add it in.
Can you repeat that question again, please?
Okay. As a feed distributor, if I'm selling straight for pilot 40, CPC 50, think of something like that, to a producer, we want our mixing. Do I have to keep track of how many grams we're selling to them, or something like keep track of the number of hogs you have, how much it should be used, and do I have to do basically an inventory while they're using it?
As a feed distributor, you are required to keep track of all the delivery records that goes to the producer, and then, of course, the formulation would also need to match what is also on that feed delivery ticket. So, does that answer your question?
Go ahead.
Well, I want to know, like, he may have, I don't know if he's really got 500 dogs out there or 550. And so, do I have to know if he's supposed to be putting 40 grams of Tylenol in the feed per ton? How many grams of Tylenol I can sell? Yeah, I just
So, what was the biggest challenge on the old VFD farms before they modernized it? Is estimating the pounds of feed that you're going to need to put. That's gone away. On the VFD form, it shows you what grams needs to be fed. If you're distributing the type B or C that needs to be remixed, then that's going to be the producer's responsibility to make sure it gets mixed correctly. So as a distributor, your responsibility is that you have a VFD form or acknowledgement of distribution that those people are going to use it appropriately. The kicker in all this is it has to be appropriately amount. That the supplier has to be reasonable in that amount. So in the first we thought that took all burden away from suppliers to worry about the volume goes out there. But we're looking at a 6-month VFD on 10,000 pigs. So I think what's reverted to is the feedback from FDA and CBM is that make sure it's some reasonable amount. If you have a VFD for 50 pigs and you're supplying them 20 bags of Tylenol 40, there has to be the reasonableness being fed. Second part of this is selective enforcement. I think people have heard those terms, particularly for the first 6 months of the year. So the goal is to help educate and train and move forward. So those kind of errors where your numbers may not be, you may have sold too much to them or back and forth and everything's not correct, I think will be selectively enforced. What's not going to be selectively enforced if you don't have the form, if it's getting mixed different than what's on the new label, you can't mix, excuse me. So even though you may have an old bag there that has the old label, it does not allow you to mix this feed after January 1st according to that old label. So I think that's where it's going to be very important that we're following through and doing it. The other thing, how many have thought about what you're going to do about prescriptions? Because these same products in the water are going to require a prescription now and not over the counter.
Thank you, Kerry.
I was wondering, in that situation, if you're not consulting, if you're just in distribution, and that is a female, they're making their own feed, or you could, correct me if I'm wrong, but if they would sign that acknowledgement of distribution of VFD feed, what that's saying is you as a supplier have that document, and they are telling you that they will keep the VFDs and keep all the regulatory processing order. Is that correct? In that situation, if they haven't shared with you the animals they're feeding and you're not consulting them, they're buying product from you, wouldn't that be the best thing to do?
Yeah, so if we are supplying a VFD medicated feed to another distributor, that distributor sends us the acknowledgement of distribution form. That is a one-time form. We keep that on file, and then we are exempt from receiving those VFDs. It would go to the second party, the second distributor.
The one thing besides that, if you do that, you have to send a one-time notification to the FDA that you're going to become a distributor as well. And then that list is publicly posted and gives you more opportunity to see if you're confirming to the regulations that way. So that's a great process. That these would be, you have an acknowledgement of distribution on hand, but that person that gives you that also has to notify the FDA a one-time notice that you're going to be a distributor, which puts you at a higher notice. So what's the goal? Is to be able to track and trace where those antibiotics go. So there's going to be a paper trail, whether you're considered a distributor or as a pure producer.
Yeah, it would seem like that as a producer, so let's say you got just 20,000 pigs on feed. So yeah, I'm just going to get the distributor thing, and I don't have to do VFDs to buy the raw product. Wrong. Because there's a whole lot more paperwork on the distributor side you have to keep track of and do. It's much simpler to just do the VFD, buy your medication from JBS or AHI or whatever distributor you pick, and fill out the VFD rather than be a distributor yourself for your 20,000 hogs or whatever number you might have. Once you get to a certain size, obviously, then you would be your own distributor. The second part of that is if you purchase a VFD feed, I know one feed mill in particular has made their customers sign off that they will not resell that medicated feed to someone without a VFD. So if you're thinking about, and I know this from the show pig side a little bit, that there may be one person in a community that'll get the VFD written and buy all the medicated feed and then resell it to the kids. Don't think that's going to be high regulatory enforcement issue, but it could be if you're making feed for your neighbor and reselling medicated feed without a VFD. Without that producer having a VFD, then you could be in some trouble. So for the people making feed for neighbors or that kind of thing, make sure you're not providing feed without them having a VFD for those individual pigs.
If you are a distributor, you still need the VFD form to make the feed. It
Right.
doesn't exempt you from that.
Yeah.
There has been some circumstances like a BOAG teacher may have the VFD written to him and several students, but Jeff's right. Be careful if you're trying to move it laterally. That's not appropriate unless you're a distributor.
So Kerry, if you're not grading feed for anyone else, you got one mill grading for all your contract growers, are you required to be a filed distributor?
So Max asked the question about, let's say you're one mill not grinding feed for someone else, but you do have contract growers, if that question is right.
But what I agree is you have to distribute.
Yeah, and there were some clarifying statements about that. I think Scott's ready to address that. So
Yeah. The way FDA had told us was that the animals, the feed mill, and the land that the barns were on had to be under one management. That is, correct me if I'm wrong, Kerry, but that would be considered a farm by FDA's definition.
It's not quite the way it reads, but they're interpreting
Yes.
it.
Yes. Yes. So if the hogs, the feed mill, and the land that the barn is on and it's under one management, it would be considered a farm under the FDA's definition. So the other piece of that would be is if you got Farm A, they own the animals, they own the feed mill, but they also have pigs 5 miles down the road to a contract grower, then I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, gentlemen, that would be considered not a farm by FDA's definition. So that
farm still owns the pigs in their contract. Somebody's contract growing this for them, and they're still part of that system.
correct.
But they were sold or they're feeding to somebody else, and it's
Yeah, so basically what FDA is saying, they're saying if the feed mill, the animals, and all the land is owned or under one management, it would be considered a farm. So they would not be truly a distributor.
So a contract grower that owns the land, owns the building, would fit. The guy running the field owns the pigs. It was all under one.
Management. Again, that's a little.
You're getting in the gray area, and that's what we're finding out. There's huge gray areas.
Yeah, that's very complex.
It'd be better from a regulatory standpoint to not have to go down that route of being distributed.
Yeah.
Is that what you would agree with?
I would agree with that. Yeah, I think it really goes back to the producer having the VFD and having those records available. I think that's the key thing. I don't think we really should get too thick in the weeds on who is a distributor, who's not a distributor. As long as the end result is, as long as the producer's judiciously feeding that medically important antibiotic, I think that's the key. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, and I think the statement Max referred to created lots of questions to the FDA, and they've added more clarity to try to be more broad than not everyone. The intent that you're going to sell feed to others is what they've kind of added some interpretation. And the second part of that is as when you look at the VFD form, if you're making the person responsible or the client or the caretaker all under that same conglomerate and not breaking them out on the same VFD form, you see what I'm saying, Max? It may have all the contract finishers may be listed, but you don't have, so that would even more substantiate that should be under one process versus distributor. If the VFD form is tracked to the original owner, not to each contractee.
There's one little detail on the, Scott kind of mentioned it on them picking out, like going to a feed mill and picking out 3 VFDs and tracing them all the way back to the producer and all the way forward to where the medication came from. It's up to the producer to maintain the records of which batches of feed and which pigs got those feeds. The VFD doesn't say, it may say a stage of diet and a number of pigs at these 15 locations, but at the end of the day, it's up to the producer's feed records to indicate exactly how many grams per ton were put in that diet and kept, and those records have got to be kept for the 2-year period. So that's the end. And I'd also like to mention too that at the end of that 2-year period, it says we're required to keep those records for 2 years, destroy those records after 2 years so that there's no trace back any farther than that. I mean, it's a 2-year window of keeping records is more of a destruction after 2 years. So once that 2 years is up, get rid of that stuff, because then you don't have to worry about providing it if you get, checked into or whatever. It's not something that can get you in trouble if it's done wrong 3, 4, 5 years ago because you kept held on to those things.
This kind of a question, probably more for Scott, but whoever. Let's say you get a VFD for 6 months, and it states on there that you're going to use 100 tons of feed.
That's not
So you don't have to put that on there.
No, there's nothing about that.
That's no longer on the
So in
VFD.
order to figure out how much you're going to get, you're going to have to estimate that, though, right?
Yeah, because on the VFD you have the approximate amount or approximate number of animals all listed on that VFD. So you may have 15 different sites listed on that VFD, but it should list all the animals that's going to be treated over those 15 sites.
Over the 6 months.
During that time period.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So let's say it's still, I'm estimating how many I need. So like, let's say I got 100, I'm going to estimate I'm going to use 100 ton of feed, and I'm going to use 10 pounds per ton, so that's 1,000 pounds of 40 miles. And so, with United Feeds, I order every 2 weeks or once a month or however often I get this product. Does anybody keep track of how much product is coming to my farm? I only need 1,000 pounds of that product for that time period. Or I get to the end of that 6 months and I got 6 bags left over, so I got 300 pounds left over.
Yeah, and that's another gray area. FDA had mentioned and stated in the preamble that they're going to rely on the feed distributor to send the appropriate amount. That is going to be challenging, specifically when you have multiple locations on that VFD. It's going to be challenging. At first I thought, when they removed the amount of final type C feed on the VFD, I thought, oh, that's a big win for the industry, because now we don't have to keep track of actually what we're sending. But in real life, we still need to keep track, because what FDA is saying, they don't want us to send product after that treatment. So if it's feed consecutively for 21 days, will we get our hands slapped if we're sending feed to the producer 40 days later? So it's going to be very hard for a feed company to determine what is that appropriate amount. So again, like I said in my presentation, I don't know if the veterinarians are going to be able to help us out on that. I know FDA had mentioned in the preamble that the feed nutritionist should be involved. Not every feed company has a nutritionist on staff, and so it's a customer service representative at that facility that's receiving these VFDs. How are they going to determine what is that appropriate amount? So there's some questions there that I'm not real sure how we're going to get through that. Now we're going to have the records. We're going to have records showing what we manufactured. We're going to have records showing what we sent you. But again, where do we draw that line? Where do we stop sending you that product?
Yeah, I was going to add just a quick comment there on. Now it's escaping what I was thinking about there. Well, it would be much easier for a feed company such as JBS United to estimate that amount than, say, an MWI or an AHI, a distributor-only company that they've just got pallets of medication. They don't sell that customer their bean meal or their premix or anything else, to have another method of estimating how many pigs that customer is feeding. So it's going to be much more difficult for a distributor-only medication distributor that's not a feed company to estimate how many tons of feed they're going to be using this in, because you guys have got records of how many tons of final premix they use for that finisher diet. So it's pretty easy to know how many tons of feed they make of that diet that's supposed to have that medication in it.
So a win, but not a clean win.
One more question.
For all the farm mixing, how do you remember keep every ton you mix and bleed out how many grams?
Yeah, it's basically every ton of every batch and what bulk bin it went to and how long it was in there. And if they've got a better method of cleaning out that bin so that they're sure that all the medication is used, those kind of things, and when that ends. I mean, basically, a lot of the farms we work with would have, you know, a bin for the nursery diet, and those pigs are on that diet for 4 weeks. So, you know, if we're writing the VFD for Denigard CTC for that, it's going to be for the 4 weeks consecutively. And if that needs to be as 2 weeks and 2 weeks, that's how the VFD will be. If that's 2 weeks back to back. And then that way, that diet in that bulk bin always has medication in it. There's always going to be a VFD for that medication. Now, the thing we didn't really talk about much is my responsibility as a veterinarian, proving the need for that antibiotic that right now is like 8th or 9th or 10th on the FDA's list of things they're going to check into, but us having a diagnosis of disease X, whether it be Pasteurella or some other such bug that tetracycline works on, that's going to be a whole nother can of worms we got to keep up with.
Jeff, you said your CTC Denigard VFD for 4 weeks, that's 2 VFDs.
Right, two 2-week VFDs.
It can only be fed for 14 days.
Correct.
So you would have to have 2 separate ones in order to be able to do that.
Yes.
Because the same VFD the same pig can't come back around and hit it again.
Exactly. Yeah, that kind of answers the question, or we created a question with a question, but of can you feed 2 consecutive VFDs with the same drug? Yes, you can do that.
So the pork quality assurance tracking should be able to, if you're tracking for that on all medication used, that should be your record system to do it. Excuse me, Tom, go ahead.
So does there have to be a day in between with no antibiotic?
So there is some discussion if you're going and write that you have to put a adverse event submission because it didn't work the first time. So there's lots to be worked out. Secondly, it's a standard of practice to show that those animals are ill that needs that. It doesn't say that it has to have an isolate or anything like that, but that's another way as we increase our sophistication. How do we tie our diagnostics, our use records all together?